Hi everyone, and welcome back to Left of the Dial, taking you through the classic age of vinyl and beyond. So right off the bat, this next series of videos is gonna be a little bit different than the ones that came before. By the way, here's an overdue but not overlong cheery hello to all this channel's longtime viewers who've stuck around during this channel's hiatus. More of the usual Left of the Dial content will resume soon enough, but I first wanted to get my year-end best of list onto here, so hopefully that will bide the time just as well. I was and still am working on a true blue return video for my Left of the Dial YouTube channel, which will be out once I'm done with this bit of videos. That video will be full of all the usual yucks and laughs and proletariat propaganda that you've come to expect from this channel. It'll be an hour long too, so hopefully that will be enough to whet the appetite of the thousands of people watching. Yeah, I see you there, viewer number 6,873. Keep it breezy, champ. That video is just kind of hanging out in my editing dock for now, since I kinda sorta had to drop everything to make sure that I finished writing my top 100 songs of 2020 list by, you know, the end of 2020. YouTube can wait until later though, evidently enough. So I've been writing these year-end 100 best songs lists going on 3 years now, and it's among my favorite things to do ever. It's my annual chance to play tastemaker. I take great pride in my selections, and it's just a blast getting to share this with other people. This year, I thought, what the hey, and decided to narrate my list to put onto my YouTube channel. That's you guys. Makes sense to me at least, your mileage may vary. I know that online text is something of a fledgling art these days, so I think this might be a better platform to get my words out there in front of people. So yeah, this whole video was a written list first, so please keep in mind that maybe some sentences look better on paper, but don't translate 100% to narration. I don't think it's much of a problem, but it's worth addressing forthright. I'll probably add the link to my written list in the description once all these videos are out. I think it mostly works fine, it's certainly worth doing, so it's all good. Just know that the approach is a little bit different than a standard 4 YouTube video would be. Capiche? I just heard like 4 of you say capiche back to me, so I'll be moving on now. But I like these kind of videos anyways. I love when online creators make the kind of content where you can just pop some earbuds in, put your phone in your pocket, and just listen to it while you go about your day. I might just do the same for my 2018 and 2019 top 100 lists for posterity's sake. We'll see. And of course, it's just a great way to spread the music that I loved listening to this year. I hope that it'll create an open discussion and that you all will chime in with what your favorites are of 2020. I would certainly love to hear it. And remember that this video is just the first part of the whole list. So while I do certainly love and enjoy every single one of the first 25 songs I'm about to rattle off here, it does only get better from here. Alrighty then, here's my intro. I'll see you all on the other side. Well, at least it wasn't boring. Let's not beat around the bush. Much of this year's music was inextricable from our real-world circumstances. There is simply no dancing around the little issue of COVID-19 and a global pandemic kind of dampening everybody's lives this year, let alone it cross-contaminating with a great deal of the music we got. This is the first time in my cognizant lifetime where I can recall everybody anywhere joining together to agree that the entire year was just a bad one. Call it a wash, we'll get 'em next time. As Tommy Wiseau once said, people are strange these days. Which days? Take your pick. Mr. Wiseau knows not linearity in time. And so, for much of this year, I just could not help but be constantly thinking of that storied adage, fear is never boring. There was a decent while this year where I was seriously doubting whether there should even be a best of list by me in 2020. Could there actually be one blip of a year where my 100 song best of list just didn't exist? Do people really want lighthearted music analyses in such a trying time? After all, even though there still was plenty of amazing music released this year that will likely stand strong in the annals of time, and we'll get to that soon enough, this unscheduled pandemic also led to many artists' cancelled plans. Did you remember that Frank Ocean dropped some promising singles that were clearly priming us for a new album? That fell by the wayside. Or what about Playboi Carti promising that the feverishly anticipated follow-up to Die Lit would release soon? This isn't the year to do that, so he didn't. Playboi Carti makes music to throw ragers to, not to play off your iPhone speakers while doom scrolling on Twitter. But there were positives too. Unlike TV or film, music can respond in a more timely manner, and it was a vital beacon of communication. Our changed happenstances led to renewed inspiration for some musicians. This was the year of what some have self-described as the quarantine album, albums made under intentionally limited conditions during this particular moment in time. But even the music that wasn't directly created in the midst of the pandemic had a certain air to it that suggested that this exact time was the most ideal for the music to see release. Take for instance how after an 8-year abstinence from partaking in any new original songwriting, Bob Dylan randomly dropped the long-sprawling and breathtakingly ungainly 17-minute-long opus about the Kennedy assassination. At any other time, this likely would have been seen as self-serving or even simply ignorable, but it's seeing release at a time when the whole world was stuck indoors with a whole lot more time to kill. The song was seen as a blessing by his fans, and it could only seem that Dylan took the world's unfortunate circumstances and flourished. Or, let's not forget about 2020's utmost critical darling in music, Fiona Apple's Fetch the Bolt Cutters, which had been almost a decade in the making, but Fiona still rushed it to market earlier than expected to coincide with the stay-at-home orders that were settling in. The music is stellar no matter the circumstances, but hearing songs sung by a virtual recluse who has long since took her isolation and chose to strive in it really hit home in a new way during this fragile, crucial time. Both of these examples made out exceptionally well in my final list. So, the music we got could only feel like it was shaped by these disastrous happenings in the world. In any way, there was still a lot of great music to appreciate this year, and I am beyond ecstatic that I get to share my 100 favorite songs this year with all of you. This list will feature some of what I am hoping were the recurring themes in music this year, as in, I want to believe that this list of mine faithfully covers the large trends that constituted this year in music, not just coming across as a pigeonholing of my own tastes. A fair warning to any of you subscribers who like to ROCK in the USA, this was not a particularly knockout year for music that was strictly guitar-based. For some added perspective, Forbes magazine had declared their king and queen of rock music this year to be Machine Gun Kelly and Miley Cyrus. Neither artist has made my list. The fact is, in this year, it was easier for artists who create pop music, rap music, electronic music, or whatever else to record new songs from the safety of their homes. Sending off verses of a song and stitching it together in post became much more manageable than getting a full 4 or 5-piece rock band in the same room together to record an album, a once simple task that proved to be more than daunting this year. These things happen. That said, there still was plenty rock music that cracked my top 100, it just perhaps has a smaller presence than in years past is all. As far as big winners and genres this year, this proved to be a surprisingly remarkable year for country music, or maybe I was just looking in the right places this time. If you were a country artist, or even country-adjacent musician, then the odds that you made something worthwhile this year were pretty high. And let's talk about hyperpop, a genre is born. Or an existing genre kept doing its thing and somebody just finally coined a good name for it. The continuing expansion of what was formerly referred to as bubblegum bass has finally settled into the better-suited catch-all genre name of hyperpop, which was one of the best things music had to offer this year. Because, I'll say it right now, that hyperpop is point-blank, no question about it, the most exciting scene happening in music right now. Its growing influence is now trickling into actual mainstream music too, and is getting stronger and stronger by the day. Keep on the lookout now. As far as music happenings this year, let's see. The musical landscape and the whole process of what determines a song as a hit has changed extraordinarily during this pandemic standstill. So now anybody, and I mean anybody, is able to crank out songs that can hit big and launch into the public consciousness. I am not immune to thinking that the fact that a song by somebody who willingly named himself Rit Momney having a chart hit is a valuable part of 2020 in music. What is going on here? While I'm at it, the Billboard Hot 100 has also been doing some weird things this year. This pandemic had obviously altered our listening habits and thrown it all in flux. If people aren't out and about hearing new songs on the radio or in Albertsons aisles, then how does America decide what the biggest and most popular songs in the country are? This is kind of a question without an answer right now, and that means we've been getting some historic happenings on the charts that will likely never repeat outside of this off-reality data stain of a year. A new chart record was set when the felonious rainbow-haired goofus who shall not be named, which does that make Nicki Minaj our gallant in this reference then, had temporarily weaseled his way out of his standing prison sentence to record a couple rap tracks with rotting tomato magnetism to them, one of which hit number 1. This is notable not for the music itself, but instead because it subsequently set the record for fastest fall from number 1 ever seen by a song, plummeting 34 spots the following week, the largest drop in Hot 100 history, and then disappearing completely from the Hot 100 within a month, also unprecedented. And that's something worth remembering. Get dunked on, kid. Lastly, in personal news, I released a music video this year. I'd be ecstatic beyond words if you checked it out. The link is in the description. So yeah, this year in music was certainly one for the history books, but I was able to find plenty worth appreciating, and I'd love for you to join me as we dive into the best music 2020 had to offer. As we all know by now, misery loves company, and I think it demands a deserving soundtrack. Let's get this show on the road. Is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car. We're going in. Pour yourself a strong, valiant glass of hydroxychloroquine, and let's jump in. We're counting down the top 100 songs of 2020. These are selections for the informed music listener. Hold my Rona. Number 100, There Is a Drone in Griffith Park by LA Takedown. Let's consider this track with its grand, sprawling nature to be the makeshift overture of the full list to come. There Is a Drone in Griffith Park greets the listener with a mirage of synthesizers tempered almost orchestral, all figuratively tuning up to its middle C before unveiling its central riff. The track is filled to the brim with cascading keyboard patterns that are all designed to mesmerize, each part drifting in and out of focus, simulating draperies of light and sound that flow to and from each channel with an unusual ease. The track doesn't stagnate while in its initial phase, and yet it still manages to lurch forward at its midpoint, propelling into a section of bright guitar fixtures and prickly arpeggiations to match. The musical endeavors of LA Takedown, which in actuality is the brainchild of one Aaron M. Olson, tellingly draws from a career in television soundtracking, a hidden toolkit to help in manifesting some exploratory soundscapes. Each new additional layer to the song's primary motif armors the main musical idea as it expands into a full song, honing in all instruments, synthesizer, guitars, live bass, and whatever else have you into calling all occupants of interplanetary craft. Number 99, Stella Brown by Jelani Aryeh. It's a classic song archetype. Boy meets girl, girl ignores boy, so boy writes an entire song about her that says everything he wishes he could tell her in real life. But reality gets in the way sometimes. This peppy little indie cut is structured most predominantly as a 2-chord fling, but the chords that are being strummed on actually couple up quite nicely alongside its lyrical sentiments of unsureness and youth. It flares off those nostalgic impulses buried deep within the listener, demonstrated by earworm melodies that hits every note down the major scale as surely and reliably as the earth can be counted on to rotate around the sun. Another day passed, another year gone, another song to write about it. For a guy with little to say, self-admitting as such in this very song, it's pretty humorous to find that our singer still manages to run out of breath in his vocal delivery at points, croaking out the tail ends of some of his lyrics. It gives the whole ordeal some extra personality. A sizable share of the song's praises goes to Jelani Aryeh's performance directly, as he maintains a nice, controlled quiver to his voice on the song. Stella Brown, I don't know what to talk about. How has my head just hollowed out? Thoughts used to orbit all around. Our singer communicates almost exclusively in wandering trains of thought, engaging in several hopelessly meandering and fully rudderless what-ifs fantasy scenarios, as these are the only kind of self-imaginative creations where he can control all the odds and be exactly the man he thinks that she deserves. On Venus we could find peace, he distractedly grumbles underneath his breath like a world-wronged teenager fuming angrily to himself while in the shower. Maybe he'll wisen up one day and tell her everything that he can make a rock song about. It just might even work out in the end. But yet, a song is not real life. Number 98, Still Feel Like a Kid by Dawes. Rock music has long since held an obsession with youth that can oftentimes border on unhealthy. There is this particular hope that some songwriters have that their music will grow and adapt with their age, this idea that crossing certain kinds of life's goalposts will open up different avenues to write songs about. That's the general approach to Still Feel Like a Kid, a country rock song about being happy with growing age and the belief that you only are as old as you say you are. I believe that to some, the song might find a bit more, let's say, usefulness than other songs released this year. The song operates as a list of daily happenings that prove your adultivity, like, I just asked my folks not to pay my rent, but I still feel like a kid. Finally learned what NASDAQ meant, but I still feel like a kid. The music itself is pretty entertaining too. Dawes clearly went to the same church of the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street worship that filters its influence back out into whatever inspires bands to turn out like Wilco. This song uses a chord progression that doesn't just cruise along in a crunchy country rock manner, as much as it stilts and staggers in equal measure, finding way to present all of the expected unexpectedness of adulthood. It works to keep your attention well enough for a 3-minute song. The band Dawes still feel like a kid, and their song still manages to come up as a triumph. Number 97, The Who's Who of Who Cares by Dougie Poole. On The Who's Who of Who Cares, outlaw country rule breaker Dougie Poole is slinging his not-so-tall tales of old country spun through a Leslie speaker. Dougie Poole finds a unique slant for himself by treating the comforting traditionalism of country music with a steady hand of 60s psychedelia. This track has its expectedly peripheral country music elements that drop in and make their cameo appearances, because of course you've got to get your pedal steel guitars and cowboy strummer guitar chords into the fray. But Dougie mingles it with some other non-country oddities that gift the track its signature twinkling afterglow. It should be stated that this song doesn't immediately set off my BS-o-meter like plenty other country light tracks do. That is, I'm talking about those barely country songs that sound almost too ashamed to even take a go at country music full hog. The ones that are annoyingly too eager and leapfrogging away from country traditionalism in search of incorporating the other, more trendy it sounds instead. I think a large reason as to why this country plus approach doesn't rub me the wrong way on the Who's Who of Who Cares is because that its otherness is being baked into the very narrative itself. For starters, the temptingly bordering on disparate music elements of the Who's Who of Who Cares come together in an incredibly organic fashion, and it gives the song a fresh personality in the process. And secondly, musicians writing country songs about not being country enough have long since been a genre staple in one way or another, so this is just a clever way of incorporating it into something brand new. When beginning the whole track with the lyric, "They told you out in the country that you ain't country enough," the Brooklyn-residing Dougie Poole proudly wears his externa country influences on his wide pleather sleeve. The humorous lyrics detail the one-off meetings and chance encounters with what Dougie calls the Who's Who of Who Cares. In the bars they know your name, but you drink on the house. There's a seat for you, just waiting at the table with the Who's Who of Who Cares. The idiosyncratic Dougie Poole declares himself to be another drifter making his way down the road and breaking out of the thin white line striped down the honky-tonk highway. It's a tale of forging your own path, advising each and every one to march to the quantized beat of their own 808 drum. Number 96, Little Less Polite by Ripe. It ain't too easy being the tough guy all the time. Sometimes it can even be more enthralling when a buttoned up common stick in the mud just lets loose and takes y'all to the ghetto university. That is, Little Less Polite isn't your usual bad guy fare. Believe me, there is more than enough songs already out there that do that just fine. It's instead all about what happens when a good man decides to go bad. And as we all know, the best way to get this motif across is through a delightfully bouncy funk rock sound with a preppy regime to it. While the ultra perky guitar lines keep choogling along, it makes itself known as yet another one of those innumerable times where white funk players just have to stop to say, thank God for Stratocasters. The keyboards are well tempered too, being peppered into the track with some strong hints of revelry to it. And let's not forget about the pump-up posse of soul horns that help to punctuate the track even further, granting the song some levels of braggadocio that could only be achieved through a pocket groove played this tight. The band Ripe uses the same manner of tongue-in-cheek lyrical musings that urged shock rocker Alice Cooper into cutting loose and declaring that there is no more Mr. Nice Guy in his number 25 US hit from 1973. The band implies that it's a behavior that can be turned on and turned off with a simple flip of the switch. That said, this approach does have its inherent drawbacks. The act of telling somebody when squaring up for a fight that you're about to get a little less polite makes it sound like you're about to get your ass kicked by Clark Griswold, or that you're about to be receiving a one-way ticket to Fist City from Richie Rich himself. Still though, the name of the game here is fun, and any excuse to leave modesty at the door is a welcomed one indeed. Number 95, ACDC CD by The Chats. What can I say? I am but a wee, hopeless schlub to the irresistible charm of The Chats. Some repeat readers of my past best-of lists might already be familiar with the oeuvre of The Chats. They broke onto the scene with the ridiculously low-grade music video for their Slackers anthem Smoko 3 years ago, which in and of itself doesn't sound right to me. Are we really just 3 years removed from Smoko? Well, time flies when the planet is on fire. I've been making these lists for 3 years now, and The Chats are the only act to regularly appear on every year-end of mine so far. If they turn a successful 2021 into a clean 4 uninterrupted years, then I'll have all but no choice but to graduate them into rock knightdom. I think the process involves a broadsword and a rack of natty lights. This year, they released a pretty satisfying album of Scrappy Is As Scrappy Does punk rock shrapnel, featuring just the right amount of their usual Chats-only fare that any fan could reasonably hope for. Songs about being drunk and disorderly were called Drunk and Disorderly. Elsewhere, there are riveting rockers about doing the dine and dash that's simply called Dine and Dash. I think what I'm trying to say about The Chats is that they don't play many mind games with their audience. The music they play could only ever have a full transparency to it. They capped this year off with another single, and this one was written as a tribute to Australia's #1 greatest export. An export greater than iron ore? That is AC/DC. This is not a joke either. The track really is just a loving work of gratitude for the hard rock titans, and their expectedly bare-bones guitar crunch is perfectly fit for the occasion. In another year where hard rock music is still hanging out in the dregs, it really is a breath of relief to hear some young rock and rollers pay service to a band like AC/DC. I think any form of AC/DC idolatry is something to be celebrated in our modern age. Rock and roll music with a capital R is drifting further and further away from the public consciousness, so I think any wholehearted and sincere appreciations towards the music is fully admissible. The band doesn't get gushy in their sentimentality, obviously, as they leave behind a few fantastically backhanded compliments, like calling AC/DC the second greatest band in history. Methinks these ever so modest chaps want you to go ahead and guess who the first greatest band might be. This type of humorous bickering directed at respected rock icons reminds me of a similar song by the actual greatest band in history, Tenacious D, and their ridiculous ode to metal god Ronnie James Dio. The D's nod towards the storied life and work of Dio was all about Ronnie getting too old to rock anymore, and thus needing to pass his cape and scepter of hard rockitude off to Tenacious D. The closest thing to a compromise on the song is when Jabel suggests to him, "Your sauce will mix with ours and we'll make a good goulash, baby." The D's tribute came full circle when Dio himself requested that Tenacious D star in his next music video for the song Push. Pretty cool, right? I clearly don't think the chats have thought anything too far out in the future for this one, but I can see plenty possibilities less real than the one where the actual ACDC takes notice of the song. I'm just saying, if they have a band meeting and decide that Axl Rose just isn't best suited for fronting ACDC anymore, then why not take a chance and plop a mulleted bass-playing ginger in there instead? It's a match made in Aussie heaven, I tells ya. Number 94, A Star Is Born by Jerskin Fendrix. The internet can be a terrifying tool in music creation. As willfully nebulous as the very concept of internet community even is, it has allowed for many newer lanes of music making to come to light, providing a platform for some of the most highly combustible song constructions to ever see release. Jerskin Fendrix is one of the more freakazoid music creators to be putting music out there right now, and A Star Is Born is his greatest point of excellence yet. It's one of those magical songs that has enough ideas for at least 12 completely different ones, all of which are crammed into a tight and frenzied 3 minutes. The easiest impression to get from his music is that Fendrix's influences compile together probably in the same way that something would be categorizable as hyperpop, the rapidly expanding music scene that it is. Hyperpop has an extreme online presence, and this music does share a resemblance. It's a fair assumption to make. I'm not sure how disingenuous this may or may not be though, because whether he even pulls from the same fabric of PC Music affiliates still remains to be seen. A large factor in the success of A Star Is Born as a piece of music is that the bizarro, wackadoo soundbites being used actually culminate into something larger instead of simply canceling itself out. It leaves behind a stunning carpet bomb of saw wave energy and pitch-bent MIDI pianos. The song appears at first to be a woefully misshapen hodgepodge of crazy music snippets, but when looking under the song's hood, metaphorically that is, there are undoubtedly a few moments of near or actualized brilliance that poke out above all the experimental rubble. The music is certifiably fractured. Beginning the whole track with some electronic shrieks is quite the choice, and the track rarely lets up from there. On further re-listens, the track is less swing and a miss than it initially makes itself out to be, because it's constructed with a surprising level of cohesion in its melodic choices and sound design, even if there definitely are some large liberties being taken in the music. Like, was that a DJ scratch I heard? The future is now, old man. Number 93, Don't Get Buried in Your Hometown by Emile T. Sitting at number 93 on the list is a lovely little song titled Don't Get Buried in Your Hometown. Some rather solid life advice, if I may say so myself. From the song's most immediate moments, the music is bolstered down by a steady onslaught of organ-churned music coming straight from the calliope, creating something of a half-dream happening, haunted somber. Emile T is a French singer, and his slight vocal inflections give the track an underlying sense of melodrama and theatrics. The voyeuristic lyrics being sung perfectly matches the tense chords when he reaches for something that's a touch more grandiose and complex than his age probably allows him, which is relatable in and of itself. Don't Get Buried in Your Hometown has these ceaselessly pulsating quarter notes at its foundation, grimly indicating a looming passage of time, creeping forward ever so slightly, ever so consistently, without any idea of reprieve to come. The timbre holds a palpable sense of dread, the kind that could almost turn into a panic attack at moment's notice. That is, until the song slowly tilts and morphs into its lighter passage during its chorus, with a bendy, rubber band bass line that almost resembles a Jaco Pastorius excursion, although perhaps not where proficiency is concerned. These brief instrumental interstitials suggest notions of travel, implicating a sense of movement that can either be towards or away from the hometown in question, which is up for anyone's own interpretations. I will note that it sounds markedly happier than its neighboring sections of music, so take that for whatever it's worth. Most importantly, the song is about going on and on, not toward or away, moving only to move. Number 92, Runner Up by TV Priest. Let me set a scene if I may. Congratulations, contestant number 7! Exclaims Monty Hall to you as the nationally beloved game show host walks eagerly towards your panel with a toothy smile. Noticeable beads of sweat drape across his forehead underneath the set's blazing red-hot stage lights. While it is distracting, you correctly guess to yourself that this noticeable discomfort from Monty you're picking up on won't be detected by the audience watching at home. The cameras can't possibly show this level of detail. The networks make him break his back, so you don't judge the man. While you are momentarily lost in thought, wondering if Monty's 10-mile-long microphone cord is really all that necessary, the game show host disrupts your train of thought when he opens his mouth and exclaims to you in a voice that's permanently set to caps lock mode. You've just won a lifetime supply of Arm & Hammer laundry detergent! Cue studio applause. But, he interrupts himself, allowing for a steady and dramatic drum roll as he prepares you for the kicker of a question. Would you like to see what you could have won if you'd only picked door number 3 instead? Mr. Hall has a Cheshire Cat grin on as he opens up the third door and shows off the brand new Camaro behind it. You could have driven home inside this cherry red Camaro if only you hadn't chosen door number 2 instead. Monty doesn't want to rain on your parade, but he knows that you know that you blew it. You carry your laundry detergent under your arm and go home, making a mental note to not watch this episode of Let's Make a Deal when it airs live. Does this sound like a fun experience to have? Well, now somebody wrote a whole song about it. Making a song about the sleazy, slicked-back game show host archetype is a pretty inspired one, and writing a rock song about being the runner-up is a great way of making you feel like a loser even when you win. The what-if scenario being exposed is the cheeky announcer flaunting, "Here's what you could have won." The UK rock band TV Priest take an inspired approach to this well-known persona and pumps that phony polyethylene television star full of dirty, girthy post-punk power. Most post-punk weirdos operate with this belief that you could magically put on anybody's skin for the duration of a song if you mock them hard enough. If you want to put figureheads on full blast, then you've just got to totally and perfectly embody them in a set of lyrics. This time, it's that of your quintessential game show host type, a crow's feet stained, cracked actor who has all the charisma to edge out above any similarly sleazy used car salesman types, or frighteningly similar TV evangelicals. In this track, the lyrical motif goes beyond just The Price is Right episode that separates blocks of daytime TV soaps. No. The singer snarls that these game show rules were specifically scribbled on a temple wall. Jesus Christ was a game show host, and assumedly Jackson Pollock and Grandma too, which is an idea that's almost spit-take worthy if I weren't already being too distracted by the razor's edge guitar slashes going on all throughout the song. The sound of the song is violent and menacing, and I wouldn't prefer it any other way. The riffing is filled with these fat, overfed guitar notes that are ready to burst when plucked with a pin. At the end of the day, we know somewhere in the back of our minds that all the piffy prizes we gift ourselves are just momentary distractions from any of life's indecencies we come across. Pointing out the mundanity of day-to-day living is some usual fodder for the post-punk genre. I'm not saying that bands using genre tropes is akin to cliché, but still, this lyrical framing and runner-up cranks it up all that much further. Maybe it's best to not want what you haven't got. Number 91, You're Not Alone by Semisonic. The year 2020 marked the return of Semisonic, a college rock band who is semi-beloved and became semi-famous in the late 90s from their catchy blend of alt-pop hooks, college rock relatability, and a music video or two that turned into MTV staples. That's right, Semisonic's new EP and its lead-off single, You're Not Alone, is the band's first batch of new material in 19 years, and although this may sound like a non-event to some onlookers, there still exist many listeners out there who continually find comfort in their back catalog of music and believe that this rock band has some worthy material that rewards some digging beneath the surface. Coming from a relatively older vanguard of rock music, You're Not Alone is anchored by a melodic major-keyed riff that sounds as though it's waking itself from a long sleep, coming to face an early Sunday morning. It's not quite a guitar riff that took upwards of 20 years to write, but it still is one that you could be proud to hang your hat on. It's quite nice to see that the band had not lost their sense of direction in the years since their radio silence. The band's instrumental has some power in its restraint as well, especially in the pre-choruses where the band exercises out any and all bad energy hanging in the empty spaces between their full band hits. It's unified and effective. Admittedly, I'll chime in and say that the lyrical department can be a bit clunky on this one. It's chock full of whatever that tipping point is from where a song's lyrics can turn from earnestly sentimental into faux motivational. Author's note, photovational? While it is easy enough to connect with in its broad brushstrokes, the lyric still registers as rather shallow. For instance, the opening lines. Everybody knows that the world is wrong, the only thing to do is to write a song, is exactly the kind of lyrics you'd come up with when you've been away from the pen for a little while. If Semisonic were an old-school hip-hop b-boy collective instead, I'd bet money that their comeback single would begin with boasts of being the real baddest DJ in the USA. But even if the lyrics by themselves aren't worth putting all that much thought into, at least the guy who's singing it probably thinks it's actually a message worth believing in. He's got gumption, and there are still at least a couple moments in You're Not Alone where he gestures toward something more grandiose than the factory set believe in yourself and you'll succeed fluff. I'm talking lines like, nobody ever told you life is long and believed it, and what would even be the point if we knew what comes next? These are fine messages by themselves, it's perfectly fine juju to put in a song, and it probably strikes a legitimate chord with many of their long-standing listeners. That's most important to them, I'm sure. Plus, coming off the back of these hellish past few years, if there are any songs out there with the intent of creating encouragement in people and banding together, then that is worth appreciating. I've been conditioning myself to find more reward away from my usual pessimism as of late, and I'd imagine others are doing the same. From the ashes of Semisonic's past, they find their footing again with great ease. Nobody in their right minds should have doubted that they'd be able to bounce back, however, since we all know that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Bartender, close tab. Number 90, Need Your Love by Tennis. Let's tighten it up now, because this is the kind of new music to tighten up with. I can't exactly wager that the Denver, Colorado music duo Tennis can dance just as good as they walk, but I can vouch for them having successfully etched out a nifty sound for themselves that favorably draws reference from retro-sounding 1970s AM radio fare, giving them a crisp and relaxed sound in their musical approach. Need Your Love is a mighty fine song coming from them, putting some seriously engaging drums at the forefront that lands on the song's upbeat with a supremely weighty thwack and pairs nicely with a staccato piano that's hammering away. In fact, I've seen at least a couple music publications draw comparisons to Carole King's Jazz Light ode to a relationship meeting its bookend, It's Too Late, and such a point of comparison could never be a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. While I say that, the tune it reminds me most of, personally, is Pillow Talk by one-time Love is Strange performer Sylvia. Both tracks have that, for lack of a better descriptor, pillowy affectation to it, careening forward with breathy intentions. I think you can guess what those are. Singer Elena Moore has a real convincing soft pop romanticism in her voice that comes through quite marvelously in this song. Whenever she reaches the part of the song where she keeps singing "I hope you're happy," it comes across like a pouty kid not getting her way in a toy store. The track also undergoes seismic shifts when it alternates from its faster tempos and verses to its cigarette drag slow choruses. It gets across a different, shall we say, mouthfeel from one part of the song to the next. The song has its small variety to it and is all the more enjoyable for it. Now make it mellow. Number 89, Strange Girl by Laura Marling. Get all your records out and throw them all away begins Laura Marling's plea for one's own self-help. No one left to listen to, much less left to say. On her new album, Laura Marling desires to turn her music into an outlet of support, striving to create self-worth in a world determined to put you down. Atop her treacly acoustic instrumental, she sniffles out a laundry list of helpful rules to follow in life, which when placed into the context of its album title and the concept it suggests, being named Song for Our Daughter, it feels like the wise words from someone with real life experience being passed on down to an optimistic youngling. Build yourself a garden and have something to attend. Cut off all relations cause you could not stand your friends. Laura's outlook on this album has been described before as wistful, a mature yearning for what is to come and what may never even be. The music is alright too, probably a pinch too paltry to be a true showstopper on its own in my opinion, but it still has enough musical merit to either hum it in your head or out loud. The first thing you're likely to notice about the song is how it directly quotes a Steve Gadd shuffle in its drum pattern. There may be 50 whole ways to leave your lover, but there apparently still exists just the one method of pulling that drum part. The chords being strummed are pleasant enough, perhaps inching a little too close to Magic Carpet Ride territory for my tastes, which is not insinuating anything as nefarious as plagiarism, it's just that I've heard this kind of chord progression being done before, time and time again. I will say that the acoustic guitars being double-tracked allows them to emote earnest and warmly throughout the song, so it's got that going for it. The song's high point is when the track expands considerably in its bridge. High-end keys fill out more of the picture, and what sounds like finger cymbals add into the equation as well. The tail end of this section ascends to its highest point when Laura lays down her own vocal harmonies, plainly yet rhapsodic, to back her up. Laura implores her listeners to look deep inside and find their own power within. Number 88. I'll Be Your Host by Touché, Amoré. There is little in life that's more aggravating than engaging in niceties even when you'd much rather not. The newest album by Los Angeles' Touché Amoré, Lament, rides high on the growing wave of emo music's reclamation in the larger state of the rockosphere in recent times. Much of the music's identity is shaped by its washed-out production timbres and incredibly propulsive guitar riffage. This song's fidgety aggressions on the snare drum bring to mind a kettle about to boil over. I'll be your host, against my will, shouts the chorus, all being expressed with singer Jeremy Bolm's fork in the garbage disposal vocal delivery. This lyrical sentiment is one based in real-world circumstance for the band. This song is reportedly a message to the Touché Amoré fans who themselves have found solace in the band's lyrics during their own personal hardships. The lyrical message to the fans is one of, if you're suffering, then so am I. Which, of course, is best portrayed as a bloodied, shambolic wreck of raw nerve and flayed tendons all spasming in rage. Did you record any of that? Mic it up. But I wouldn't go as far as to call this a reluctant hero story, as our singer is very much too snotty and self-absorbed in this song for that kind of label. The track does eventually find its solace in its own unique way, from a simmering middle 8 with reflective tones, allowing for its bitter come-down that has been suggested from its lyrical onset. Touché Amoré may be your host, but it's clear that we've won nothing except hurt feelings and bruised ribcages. Good day, sir. Number 87, Sat by a Tree by Dan Deacon. If you are in the market for a modular synth extravaganza, then you'd best sit back and plug on in for this number. 2020 saw the release of Dan Deacon's Mystic Familiar, Deacon's first studio album since 2015's positively received Glass Riffer, a record that is still being doted upon even today. Mystic Familiar prides itself as being a keyboard enthusiast Cirque du Soleil of sorts, a record that is all about geeking out and making its synth wizardry worth the price of admission, if you are into that sort of thing, that is. Sat by a Tree is one of the more life-filled outings on the album, setting up a hectic pulse early on and not letting up until its very close. The melodies are chosen seemingly at near random, I'd assume by placing trios of notes onto a spinning wheel and allowing them to fall wherever they may land. The greatest charm to Sat by a Tree is its dense sound comprised of teeny tiny music quirks. There are squared off keyboards that squick and wheeze to the electronic beat, and there appear to be some skittering cowbells hidden beneath the walls of sound. Bass parts get modified through fields of distortion, and it's not uncommon at all for vocals to undergo some serious pitch alteration. Violins gift the song some desired poignance at its close and tidies things up in a neat little package. When put together, the amalgamation of sounds does connect to an overall feeling, and it is an uplifting one at that. Regardless of how its plastic sounds all originated, the end result is one of virility. Tune in and drop out. Number 86, Pariah Radio by King Chubby and the Gang. The blistering old-school punk-indebted debut by King Chubby and the Gang is music being played by joyfully flammable matchstick men trying their very best to self-ignite mid-song. The music is wicked speedy and positively incendiary. The band is dead set on letting England shake via their lightning strike guitar ground pounds. This type of happy, sweaty punk, what with its crunchy guitars that frantically adds the pinky in there for some good old-fashioned Chuck Berry riffage, could easily be recommended for any fans of an Andrew WK type. Heck, it could even be roped into oi punk if you're especially convinced that's where it should be. Their debut album is titled Speed Kills, assumedly a nod towards the 6th track on British art rockers 10cc's self-titled album. And make no heads or tails about it, speed is the name of the game here. Like for instance, how every single one of the drummer's fills sound like a body falling down all the stairs. I'm also just heads over heels for this production sound the band achieved. The guitars sound so clearly defined through their amplification, and the vocals are given a great space in the mix to unleash themselves proper. Flecks of backing vocal harmonies help color the track in even further. Declaring itself to be an anthem for Pariah Radio is a fantastically fun way to celebrate a band's self-proposed distance from the mainstream. This is a band you wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, as opposed to our 2020 standard 6-foot pole we've all been using. No? Just me? You yourself might be asking, okay, look pal, I see the song's runtime. This ain't even a whole 2 minutes. Can a rock song this short really still leave an impact? And I just say, cyanide is bite-sized too, you know? Number 85, My Body by Claud, featuring Delwater Gap. My Body is a plaintive electro ballad that leads off with a request of needing love in a bathroom stall. Alright then. This is going to be a song of lonesome love with too much time to kill. The song tangles itself around the whole idea of I'm not in love with you, but I'll make love to you, playing with the do's and do not do's of intimacy with a partner that might not stick around. Its accomplishments as a song are found in the small series of fascinating choices it makes, like how Claud uses their vocals in a complete pitch correction overhaul. Autotune is a fine and steadfast opportunity to detach the voice from the body, creating a bit of distance in the narrative itself and from whomever sings it. It is doubly interesting then that it employs primarily an acoustic guitar as its central instrument, an instrument that one could easily surmise as more authentic. When paired together over some canned drums, it creates something that's both new and old. Not quite here, not quite there. The lasting effect is something that feels hollow at its middle, getting across the depressing idea that sits at its core. At least, I would certainly hope that the chorus of "You only want me for my body" is just about the saddest thing you could ever hear. It gets across such a profound feeling of emptiness in this execution. The track never fully leaves the ground far enough to soar away, but rather, it hovers around instead. The look on your face could make you think it's fate when you're totally naked. Number 84, Just a Kid by Princess Nokia. Princess Nokia had an interesting approach to music this year, dual releasing 2 albums with completely opposite messages. Her first album of the year was Everything Sucks, and the second was the more optimistic Everything is Beautiful. I'm a lonesome loser, so I preferred the Everything Sucks album. As the darker of the 2 albums, Everything Sucks is mostly a horrorcore pastiche, with Princess Nokia waving her freak flag high and showing no restraint in unleashing her deranged and unusual vocal performances, clearly owing some sizable debt of gratitude to Nicki Minaj's unique vocal stylings. At the end of an album full of neat detours in the crazy house, or talking up the benefits of being gross and all that fun stuff, the album has the decency to end on its most sincere, reflective track, Just a Kid. I do not know what Princess Nokia's upbringing was like. I have little reason to not believe that this song is autobiographical, describing her rough childhood and history of being moved from household to household and experiences with familial deaths. Yeah, it's a downer, but it's very affecting as a work of music and gives a better glimpse behind the suckitude into who Princess Nokia may be. Number 83, Serafina by Bambara. Serafina is probably not the same boy meets girl song you've heard 1,000 times over. The spoken word, tortured narrator plays the song off as a conversation. "What's your name, if you don't mind?" She said, "My name is Serafina, but people call me Sarah to save some time." And luckily for Serafina, he has more than enough time to give her. The rest of the band has next to no interest in playing the song straight at all. They go for the jugular with no hesitance in a spiraling cataclysm of Dwayne Eddy's surfing guitars delivered with a haughty gothic bent. The drum recordings reek of dirty warehouses and guitar effects that go thump in the night. If the titanium-edged glint to the song recalls that of another noise rock band, perhaps you're not alone, seeing as how Bambara has supported the horror rockers Daughters on a 2019 tour, and the similarities between the two are at least palpable. I would argue that any surface-level comparisons to Daughters are not one to get hung up on, though. The track scratches that perfect sweet spot for all the gloomy antics to be had. Number 82, Strange Life by X. The legendary Cali punk act X are back in action with their first album in 27 years, Alphabet Land. Now normally, most any band who has been out of the spotlight for some long period of time would usually need to readjust to meet their audience's expectations for what an aging punk group should sound like. But X gets by on this new comeback album pretty undeterred because their shtick was semi-consciously always kind of old-fashioned even from its upstart, so the passage of time has done little to affect their innate charm had as a band. The guitars pound away at some full chords in root position, the drums thump at the beat steady as ever, and Exene Cervenka and John Doe sing their usual co-lead vocals the whole way through. It's such a blast to hear them get back to doing what they're so well known for. This track, Strange Life, is all about the strange days, strange nights, and strange lives they've lived, and I have little doubt that their journey in getting to this present day has led to a life that would be rather strange. Probably stranger than yours or mine. Their third album, and in my estimation, their approximate masterpiece, Under the Big Black Sun, gave a sneak preview into what their strange private lives might look like. So having a full career in the rear view gives them extra leniency towards this particular style of pat yourself on the back, life well lived song lyric. Thankfully, the music doesn't pretend to be anything that it isn't. It all has a very self-assured classic rock sound to it. In this instance, its debt of rock servitude comes across sounding rather comparable to an AC/DC-ish riff. For myself at least, it certainly recalls It's a Long Way to the Top If You Wanna Rock and Roll, which is at least a fitting song to be reminded of. When it comes to classic, feel-good punk music, it's more than safe to say that X hits the mark. Number 81, Lick the Bag by Viagra Boys. For all the times when 99.5 just won't do, sometimes you also gotta lick the bag. Do you really think that Wilson Pickett would have appreciated me name-checking his song alongside such an abrasive and ridiculous piece of music just now? Well, I hardly doubt that this band would care. Viagra Boys are a Swedish noise rock band who obsess over making songs with the ugliest grooves this side of misshapen ruffles. Lick the Bag is the sonic equivalent of a constant itch, and a pretty clear allegory for compulsiveness and addictive tendencies. I'd go even further and say that all these disgusted grunts by vocalist Sebastian Murphy are in the name of a more flippant dependency as he seeks out for more and more and more. The band has a grand old time too, and is filled to the brim with sound effects that tinker around and rattle from the rush. We get some digitized saxophone chokes, synth tones that are both confrontational and decayed, and some incredibly wonky sounding percussion. They demand you turn the bag inside out and cover every square inch, over, under, sideways, down. Don't stop till you get enough, I guess. Number 80, She's a Self-Made Man by Larkin Poe. Wise sages could advise you to never mess with any gal who calls herself a self-made man. You're assuredly going to regret it. She's a Self-Made Man is a fuzzy Thin Lizzy style rocker full of husky vocals, southern grit, and full-blooded guitar riffing. Now, there has been no shortage of powerful women calling themselves the man in music and beyond, because after all, any human who's doing totally BA stuff can worthily be called the man. It sends across a cool message. It's a man's world, after all. Who wouldn't want to take the bull by the horns on this one? The gate is wide open. Larkin Poe really do justice to the title with its music. It's hard to argue with someone who describes herself like a cannonball moving down the track and sounds like she believes it. The duo meet each other on the track when pairing for an Alice in Chains-y vocal proximity while singing the title's phrase. It's super invigorating and intense. That's not to forget that the track eventually segues into a rambunctious slide guitar part, readied all coiled up and hissing. The guitar slide bounces between an energetic series of off notes that hit so right on her bottleneck guitar sections. Crank it up and get ready to rip, tumble, and run. Number 79, Out in Space by Wiz Khalifa, featuring Quavo. Wiz Khalifa spent his time stargazing at the skies above and has come back down to earth with a super spaced out and zen to high heavens rap track. I can't help but laugh at how a growing number of pockets in the rap game have been gradually coming to terms with the idea of Tame Impala heavily informing a new brand of production styles. This growing bubble of music affiliated with psychedelic rap music has only been getting larger and larger in recent memory, and many artists from all over have been watching and taking notes. I'm not sure what musical grounds Wiz shares with Travis Scott of all people, but I can't blame him or anybody else for wanting to take a slice of the apple pie. Full disclosure, I actually have like zero gauge at all for whether or not this buzzy, spaced out, Kid Cudi reminiscent acid rap style comes authentic to Wiz at all, but he sounds fantastic on this track. Wiz gives the song the rapid-fire rap flow that it deserves. Not one that is very virtuosic in that regard, but instead it works to achieve nothing but forward momentum, building a head of steam and blasting off outside the observable universe. Quavo of Migos fame makes a welcomed enough appearance on the track, and he seems perfectly at home over this instrumental. The duo pairs well together, and it's alright by me. Toss in a Real G's Move Like Silence line as an off-the-cuff reference to Lil Wayne's legendary lasagna bar, and you're gonna have a good time. I came from the bottom, I know where the basement is. Number 78, A Prayer Before Dawn by Unreal City. If you're stuck somewhere in the middle of a cold, harsh, and brutal December, then why not try to headbang the frost away? A Prayer Before Dawn by Unreal City is a thrashy rager of a track that'll be sure to satisfy any metal hellhounds out on the prowl. The PA group makes hardcore music that is readily primed for anybody who's still clamoring for the glory days of Slayer and Testament. It creates an icy cavern of discomfort, spouting off lines like, "Violence is a spiral, I keep spinning down," which is in all actuality a pretty apt descriptor for this song. The guitars on this track are practically knife carved from visceral muscle itself, and they are chugging away at spiky chords played at compelling intervals. When the guitars do eventually clean up, it evokes images of a toiler on the sea, reckoning with a real tempest of a guitar solo that threatens to capsize the whole operation. It all comes together in an epicus doomicus heavy song to incinerate your home and kick the dust in your eyes. Number 77, Cop Car by Mitski. I get mean when I'm nervous, like a bad dog. This bad dog in question is a harbinger of fear on this track, lifted up by a haunted indie rock guitar piece that escalates up and outward throughout the track. Well, it's more the spooky, scary kind of affair, like a cardboard cutout of a Halloween exhibit. It is rather unusual for Japanese-American songstress Mitski to be the focus of a dark song with menace. She is not really the first person you'd think of who can really gnash her teeth at onlookers. So, she uses her skills as an artist to construct interesting ways of manipulating fear to still work in her favor. I don't think full-on aggression is really in her singing toolkit. I sincerely doubt she'll ever get behind the microphone and unleash any Courtney Love power shrieks. She usually prefers reservation in her vocals, thus when making the musical backing on Cop Car that denies her usual vocal tranquility, it marks its own purpose. This is also the return of the Mitski double-track vocal, seeing as how Be the Cowboy made a conscious effort of being recorded with just Mitski's solo voice to achieve its enchanting one-woman-in-a-room effect. Mitski chases sounds that are harmonically interesting, rich, or engaging. She leans on a tritone chord and lets the devil's interval do all the talking for her. The chords are unmistakably simple and creates a mood that veers towards the heavy and apocalyptic. It is invigorating to hear an artist who is confident in working with her chord sequences first and then deliberately creates melodies that are special crafted to fit inside whatever harmonic sequence she has created. Which maybe sounds like the bare minimum to music making, but when there are so many artists out there who seem to treat their chord progressions or song melodies as a complete afterthought, Mitski and her through-composed music seems all the more special. This cut is evidently a composition from Mitski's earlier years that's been left on the shelf until now, making sense to why this song falls more in step with her earlier, more guitar-centric songs. This one seems to date back around to her Bury Me at Makeout Creek days, and it got either re-recorded or gussied up for release in some big Hollywood popcorn munchers horror flick. The film it's from, The Turning, got an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. Movie theaters were closed all year. I didn't see the movie. It is not a bad move for Mitski to unearth some of her unused songs, especially now that there are more eyes on her than ever since Mitski's 2018 Be the Cowboy album was undoubtedly the most critically revered album of its year. Maybe make an exception for Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour, but no, I still think that Mitski's album got the critical edge between the two. Let me state for myself that since I now have some added hindsight and a more substantial knowledge of Mitski's back catalog of music, I can properly assess that Be the Cowboy was probably not the most logical starting point for a new listener like myself. Not as an accessibility thing, no, but it's just a way more pinpointed and myopic rendition of her usual songwriting craft where it sounds way less effortful than it really was in actuality. That was my read, at least. I was a little unimpressed with my first few listenings to the album, but I now think that it is a fantastic and digestible smidgen of art rock. Put that puppy on a leash already. Number 76, Trap Blues by Deuce. Crunk ain't dead, is what Deuce constantly shouts. I'm certainly one to differ, but ever since Deuce took the scene, he wants the whole world to know that crunk is alive as ever, as long as you truly wish it to be. Which makes it sound like some Willy Wonka imagined hocus pocus, but I'll respect the man for taking a stand. A stand for crunk music. Now I've got my own doubts that crunk ain't dead, since I'm pretty sure that in actuality, crunk is dead as jazz music, but I'll entertain his notion if I can at least get some fun music out of it. Memphis Massacre 2 is a great, nostalgic little trip of an album, as Deuce fawns over the 2000s era of bling rap and drippy mafioso swagger. Its crowning moment, as I've already suggested, is his Crunk Ain't Dead remix that is so studded that one of its featured rappers is probably already wearing it as a grill. He wrangled in an A1 group of Crunk's finest with Lil Jon, Project Pat, and Juicy J on the track, which makes for a fantastically entertaining revisit to that particular era of hip-hop. Let it be known that I am a filthy vermin who was born in 1997, so this revisiting or reassessment of crunk music doesn't particularly trigger any knee-jerk reaction in me. By the time crunk was in its fullest swing, I was more preoccupied with Yu-Gi-Oh cards and Fairly Odd Parents reruns than anything concerning the monstrous popularity of crunk music at the time. I do not froth at the mouth or perk my ears up high when I see BuzzFeed do a "Where Is He Now" on rapper Chingy. I can't tell if that makes whatever Deuce is going for here advantageous to my listening experience or not. I don't have much nostalgia over that bygone time for hip-hop, but I also don't have the experience of it grating on my last nerve like many others can recall, in the darkest moments of bling rap curdling into ringtone rap. That being said, Deuce can still participate fine in rap's modern climate, and Trap Blues works on at least a couple more levels than the rest of the album does. He sets it off right with a blustering, dusty sax sample, setting the mood for a beat that is colder than a polar bear's toenails. Talking about the trap yo buddy yup word to your mother is absolutely fair territory for any crunker, past or present, and if anyone were to come across this song in a vacuum, or Spotify playlist, and mistake it for a straight-up trap rap song, I'm sure no one would complain. There is also way more melody in his performance than one would really expect. Deuce switches up the flow more than he probably really needs to. There is a bit more effort put into it than many others surely would have bothered with. I'm inclined against my will to also assume this song is substantially more lowbrow than I might think it is. But I'll still gun for it. I see little reason that Roddy Ricch's The Box gets to stand head and shoulders above other flow switchers, yet another rap song like this doesn't get to do the same. Regardless if it's a foot in the past or another relic of today, Trap Blues is a banger that'll be sure to leave you trappin' and snappin'.